This is Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. Former President George W. Bush has joined the growing ranks of critics opposed to the release of the CIA's torture tactics as compiled in a report by the Senate Intelligence Committee. The report, years in the making and held up by the CIA, fueled tensions between senators and the agency but is expected to be released today. In anticipation of the backlash the military expects it will generate, thousands of troops stationed around the world have been put on alert. Meanwhile, 6 prisoners who have spent years in the U.S.-run Guantanamo Bay Detention Center finally left their prison over the weekend and were transferred to Uruguay. 4 of the men are Syrian, 1 is Tunisian, and 1 is Palestinian. Uruguayan President Jose Mujica referred to the men as humans suffering a heinous kidnapping in Guantanamo, and that Uruguay was playing a role in helping return them to their homes for humanitarian reasons. 136 men remain imprisoned at Guantanamo, down from more than 750 who were originally imprisoned by the Bush administration in the years following the September 11th attacks. These days, the foreign policy realm of U.S. politics reflects well the domestic policies of violence against marginalized communities here at home. While brown and black people abroad suffer the brunt of U.S. violence, the same is true here in the U.S., and protests against police killings have reached new heights in the past few weeks and months. As part of what is being called a week of outrage, people in cities across the nation are speaking out and marching. In Berkeley, a second day of protest last night resulted in the shutting down of the I-80. Major League basketball players have put messages of solidarity on their uniforms. Protesters have even confronted the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge during their visit to the U.S. Joining us to connect the dots is Vijay Prashad. He's the George and Martha Kellner Chair in South Asian History and Professor of International Studies at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. He's written many books, including Arab Spring, Libyan Winter, and The Darker Nations, A People's History of the Third World. He's also a contributor to the new book called Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. And he has a new article in Counterpunch entitled Black Bodies, Broken Worlds. Welcome to Uprising, Vijay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sonali.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, first, if you look at the photos of U.S. troops guarding Guantanamo or the photos of police in Ferguson, Ferguson, Missouri, the level of similarity between these two is striking. You see people wearing, police wearing riot gear in the U.S., looking similar to soldiers on the battlefield. And is that similarity in how those who are supposed to sort of keep the peace reflective of the similarity that we see both in the domestic and the foreign realm?
Well, Sonali, the people who are standing outside prisons, who are marching the streets in Afghanistan, or indeed the people who are, supposed to defend the cities, they are simply the symptom of a very, very deep problem. And this deep problem reflects the current situation where the managers of the world system have simply no mechanism to create jobs for people. I mean, global joblessness is at perilous conditions. You might remember during the high point of the Arab Spring, there was some chatter about this demographic bulge. And commentators were saying that, because there are all these young people who are unemployed in the Arab world, it was inevitable that there be something like the big Tahrir, demonstrations. Well, since the backlash against Tahrir Square, that demographic bulge has not disappeared. And so there are young people around the world who deserve to have capital turned over to their interests for them to, do some decent kind of work to improve the world. But that is just not happening. Instead of that, these young people are frustrated, and the managers of the world system have decided, whether it's Ferguson, Missouri, or it's Baghdad in Iraq, to just crack down against them with military force.